Dandavat pranams to all of our friends and family members. We're continuing our Upadeshamrita challenge. Congratulations to all of you who have been following so far. Pat on our head. And special thanks to those who have been writing in with their encouragement and appreciation. I had a nice message from Vindhya following here in London, Rama Sarup in the US, Somya Sham wrote in. So thank you all. So we've reached verse number 4. It's a really beautiful verse describing the 6 loving exchanges. And so these are describing intimate forms of communication or association, intimate forms of association, we can say, which is applicable in any sphere of life. And the idea is that we want to try to restrict this more intimate type of association with persons with whom we want to have a more subtle, energetic exchange with. Because when we associate with someone, it's not just a physical activity, but there's an exchange on the level of consciousness. And there's even, even in general world culture, there's some feeling for this. For example, in English, there's this expression, I won't break bread at your table. There's some sentiment, there's some type of culture like that traditionally throughout the world that, there's this idea that you don't want to eat with someone with whom there's some bad feeling, that there's some intimate level of exchange there energetically, which you want to reserve for persons with whom you have some loving feeling. So this is the idea that, okay, we associate in a general way in our daily lives, but these more intimate things we want to reserve for persons with whom we have faith, trust in the line of devotion, the line of Krishna consciousness. We will think carefully about that. So without further ado, is the verse, dadāti, pratigṛhṇāti, guhyam, ākhyāti, pṛchchhati, bhuṅkte, bhojayate, chaiva, ṣaḍ-vidhaṁ, prīti-lakṣaṇam. So the first, dadāti, to give gifts, dadāti, pratigṛhṇāti, and to receive gifts. This is the first type of loving exchange that is mentioned. And then, we can also take these exchanges as an example of ways in which we can express appreciation, our love and appreciation for others on the path. So to offer gifts and to receive gifts. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj also relates this exchange with the concept of prasad, that we will try to live in this consciousness that I'm living on the prasad, on the remnants, the holy remnants of the Vaishnavas, and also to some extent, these things, they are ideals, right? We may not necessarily be able to practically apply these things, partly because of the culture, the society that we're in. For example, in a workplace, right, it may be expected that you give Christmas gifts of some kind to all your co-workers, So we won't be too fanatic, right? We will try to adjust with our environment. We want to live our lives in a harmonious way and not unnecessarily invite, antagonism upon ourselves. So, but we are also culturing the ideal and appreciating the ideal, even if we can't necessarily implement it within our lives. So this is the ideal, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj discusses this, that we won't buy anything new for ourselves, but we will try to take only prasad. We will try to live on the grace that comes to us as far as possible. We will try to live like that. And actually, in the early days in our temple, in our mat, in Navadvip, in India, this was something that was observed in quite particularly. Actually, nobody would keep anything for themselves. This was the general way that things flowed. Nobody would buy or keep anything for themselves. Nobody would even keep individual bank accounts. Even if somebody needed a toothbrush, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, the Acharya, he would personally give that. If someone needed new clothes, they would go to the Acharya, go to Guru, and request that. So this is the highest, expression of this ideal, that we are just living on grace. What comes to us from the higher plane. We are living on that. And then guhyam, ākhyāti, pṛchchhati. Guhyam means confidential, something that is hidden. Ākhyāti means to tell, and pṛchchhati, to inquire. So this exchange of confidential talk, confidential words, where we are opening our hearts to someone. Our Gurudev commented once to one devotee that you can show your respect to everyone, but whom you will give your heart to, be careful about that. Be careful about that. So we are trying to live in that way. We give respect to everyone, but who we will reveal our heart to confidentially, must be very careful about that. And I'm sure all of us have experienced how we can get ourselves in trouble, right? If we reveal our heart to the wrong person, whether it's in a practical sense and in various social dealings, it gets us in trouble, or in a level of faith or emotion, or our heart, we become disappointed or we feel cheated in some way. That we have revealed our heart to someone who is not worthy of that, who does not appreciate it, or who may even use it against us, right? Who doesn't understand the subtleties and nuances of our feeling. So ideally, someone who is a little more advanced than ourselves, to that person, we will open our heart, and then they can give us their holy advice. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj also discusses this from that angle in one place, that in terms of like finer aspects, issues that come up in our practicing lives, we can inquire from the sadhu, how have you faced this? This is what I'm struggling with right now. How have you faced this? What is your advice in this situation? We can inquire from the sadhu who is experienced on the path, someone whom we can trust. Our Gurudev made this interesting point, which I appreciated so much because it's so real. That we hear in a general way, right? Seek higher association, seek superior association, of senior Vaishnavas. But our Gurudev made this point that we also have to consider, like, does that Vaishnava care for me? Have particular care for me? Because we may experience there's a Vaishnava who is advanced, very qualified, but they don't take much interest. They don't care very much about us, for whatever reason. So then are we meant to just go and, like follow the formula, inquire, surrender to this advanced Vaishnava, because that's what we're told we're supposed to do, but they don't actually have they don't take any personal interest. So our Gurudev made this interesting, very relevant point. Seek out the association, like the intimate, close association of those senior Vaishnavas who take some personal interest, have some heart interest. They care about our welfare in a personal way. So, and that may not always be available, unfortunately, sadly. There are other lessons to be learned there, right? In separation and solitude. But if we have that type of association available, to take advantage of that, someone who cares about me on an individual level. So to inquire, to show our heart. And it's actually important for our progress that once, when I was in Ukraine a few years ago, there was one young woman this was in a big temple space, a lot of persons, 20, 30 devotees present. And she told me, and it moved me so much, she said, we were kind of talking around this issue about the value of having close friends in Krishna consciousness. And she told me that in a very heartfelt, somewhat sad way. She said, I know the reason I'm not making any progress is because I don't have any friend like that. There is no one like that in my life, to whom I can fully open my heart. She said with this clarity and sadness, I know this is why I'm not making progress. So there is so much value in being able to fully display our heart before a Vaishnava, to be naked before a Vaishnava. There's an expression of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, where he says, let the Vaishnava enter the workshop of your heart. Let the Vaishnava enter the workshop of your heart. You know, we can't really be clear on where we are actually until we're able to fully express ourselves openly. You know, sometimes we like kind of artificially restrain ourselves, and then we don't really know what mess is inside. And until the mess can come out, we can't clean it up. There's one quote, one of my favorite literature quotes, E.M. Forster, brilliant British writer. How do I know what I think until I see what I say? How do I know what I think until I see what I say? No, so we need to be in that kind of environment where we feel safe to really speak our minds and be corrected. You know, and I'm grateful I have some friends like that, you know, that I may sometimes, you know, correct them, and then they may another time they'll correct me. You know, because we're both trying to live abiding by higher truths and higher principles, and sometimes they're reminding me, sometimes I'm reminding them. And it's a safe space where we feel free to express our hearts, even if it's wrong sometimes. So if we can have a friend like that, even if it's only one, you know, it is the most precious thing. There's actually, is it here? There's a beautiful quote of Srila Sridhar Maharaj where he speaks about this, the value of having a friend on the path. I should have had this ready. I'm terrible preparing things. But anyway, you know, along these lines, I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet, right? So then the next, bhuṅkte, bhojayate. So to be fed, to receive food, and to give food. You know, this is also quite an intimate exchange, as we were mentioning. You know, it is you know, like giving food to people is also synonymous with love, like offering love. You know, and even in the highest plane, and we see this beautifully expressed, demonstrated in Chaitanya Charitamrita and the divine Leela of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're always hearing about this loving exchange of prasad, of food, you know, like the Lord's grace, the Lord's remnants, and sharing that as an expression of love amongst our Vaishnava group. You know, it is an expression of love, expression of affection. And it's mentioned when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, and he would sometimes personally distribute prasad, and there's one expression, one phrase there, Kaviraj Goswami says, you know, from the Lord's hand, little did not come. Like, it's more or less like that. Little did not come from his hand. And it's mentioned several times how you know, he would give everyone 3 times more than anyone could eat. And it's mentioned several times in Chaitanya Charitamrita that devotees would take prasad up to the neck. You know, this was like the standard thing, you know, taking prasad up to the neck, the kanta. You know. So because remember, in all these things, there's an exchange of consciousness, exchanging food, exchanging heart, exchanging gifts. You know, so who we are eating, you know, who we are eating with, what we are, you know, where we are eating, where the food's coming from. There's some energy, some consciousness behind all of that. You know, so we will be careful from whom we receive. One interesting point our Gurudev made is that if, you know, because, you know, we have to be practical, right? You know, we can't always expect to eat prasadam straight off the altar, right? You know. So one interesting thing our Gurudev said and stated is that if there is some exchange of money, say, then that will nullify the karmic load is attached to some particular food. So like if you're purchasing, you're out, you need to eat something. If you purchase, then because you're giving in, there's some exchange there, then that kind of like things are on an equal basis, and the karma will be nullified, he said. So that's an interesting thing. So I'm sure there are many other things that could be said, but we can try to let this not go on too long. And, again, going back to what I was saying in the beginning, we are practical, we do follow common sense. So obviously these things aren't always practical in modern working life. We have to make different adjustments. Previously, like in the Vedic culture, and still to some extent you'll find this in India, more or less in different places. But they're like, this was something that was emphasized. Like you won't even eat food at the same table as someone who's of a different caste from yourself, because there's all these considerations of energy and all these things. And so, it's an environment which is supporting this kind of fine discrimination, although there's also dangers where the discrimination is going in a negative, prejudiced kind of way. So anyway, ultimately we are practical people. We have to harmonize with our environment. But these are things to bear in mind, as we go about our daily lives. Be conscious about, with whom we are exchanging energy, with whom we are giving our heart to, whom we are giving faith, putting faith in. We will try to be conscious. And ultimately, we are depending upon the holy name, right? And the connection, the higher connection of grace with Guru, Gauranga, Vaishhari, Guru, Vaishnava. And taking shelter of the holy name, taking shelter of the inner connection that we have with them. And our Gurudev was also like that. Our Gurudev did not follow all the stipulations, so strictly. But he would adapt according to time, place, and circumstance. We're living in a contaminated world. And so we cannot expect to always follow things according to the highest standard. And we are practical. But these are things, some principles to bear in mind. Okay, I'm going to end there. Thank you for tuning in. Jai Shri Gurudev. Oh, I did not read. I will read the translation here too. Giving and accepting gifts, discussing and inquiring about confidential matters, and giving and partaking of foods are the 6 characteristics of affection. So, on the negative side, these kinds of intimate exchanges we will try to avoid, with persons of a consciousness that we don't want to partake of, we don't want to share. Remember, there's individual karma and there's also collective karma. So we have to ask ourselves that too, like, do we want to take responsibility for the karma of the persons we're associating with? If the answer is no, then try to distance yourselves a little from those persons. Because it's a real thing. If you are associating with a particular group, then you will have to, it's common sense, you will have to take on some of their karma too. You're getting involved in their circumstances and their lives and their energy. So on the negative side, we'll try to distance ourselves, try to avoid these types of intimate exchanges with persons of an energy vibration, ideal that we don't share. And then on the positive side, we will see that we can take this as a model of how we can express appreciation, right? How we can become closer, with the particular Vaishnava or group of Vaishnavas. How we can express our heart, receive their grace, and all these things. Okay, I'll stop there. Jai Shri Gurudev.